Hey Triple Fivers, Andrew here with a quick look at a prototype, something I don't usually do on this channel, but I'm excited about this watch. This is the Orion Calamity, and I was contacted by Nick Harris, who is the founder and president of Orion Watches, to show off his latest wares. And this watch is interesting to me, not only just because I think it's a cool classic design. We'll take a look at the specs here. 40mm case, 20mm lugs, 11.3 inches thick, ceramic bezel, and interestingly on the back here we've got 2892 movement and ETA movement. I'll try to get that in focus there. Sorry about that. Yeah, you can see there's that ETA movement. This watch is interesting to me not only because it I think is a very solid microbrew watch design, and I always like to highlight when some of these smaller companies are coming out with a very competent, solid design. I'm also showing it to you because I think it's trying to do something in terms of breaking into a new price segment, and I'll be talking about that in this video. I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily, and I'll certainly be interested in hearing your opinion on it as well. So Orion watches made a buzz with the Orion 1 and then the Field Standard, and the Calamity here is hitting the scene trying to reach into a new price bracket. As I mentioned, this watch is going to retail for $14.95, and that is a big ask for a microbrew watch. Not an impossible ask, I would say. You know, I think that this is a price we have seen with watches historically, like the PRS Dreadnought comes in mind, and certainly you see limited edition watches from a number of makers, Autodromo, you see a number of other smaller brands, smaller dive watch brands like Docs are releasing watches at this price point. So it's not a crazy price, but it's an interesting one, and here's why. I think from a kind of a longer view perspective as a collector, what I remember were the good old days in the early mid-2000s where you could get a 2892 or 2824 dive watch from a big Swiss brand, say Omega or Breitling, for right about the price that this watch is selling for new. And of course, these larger Swiss brands have largely abdicated the scene of these sort of mid-priced divers. And so I think that it's great that the companies that are able to produce watches at a level that arguably justifies the price is trying to reach into that largely abandoned priced bracket. And what are some of the things here that make this watch stand out more? Well, as I mentioned, it has a ceramic bezel, it has a good 2892 movement. Really, you know, from a pure specs standpoint, this is equally good or better than, like, say, the average tag aqua racer that you would be getting from a dealer, and it's probably just as nice as some of the entry-level Breitling divers. It has great details in the fit and finishing. Just notice these thin little bezels, these carefully designed lugs. Here's the crown and focus here. You can see that this lug design is going to be very practical on the wrist. Typical oyster style bracelet. This is BGW9 lume, which is a pretty blue lume, just a really nice kind of a classy blue lume. And the idea, of course, is that altogether this watch is a very complete package. Very nicely made, lots of great details. And if you love the design, if you love the colorway, this is a unique colorway. I love the army green example here in front of me. This would be a very interesting watch for the guy who especially loves microbrew watches and maybe wants to reach above 1,000 and doesn't want to have to worry about, for example, picking up a used SMP on the market and having to worry about getting it serviced, because some of those watches are, you know, over 20 years old now. You can get a brand new watch and also at the same time be supporting an individual maker and supporting his design and his process. And so I think that there's definitely a place in the market for a smaller watch brand to be doing things like this, and I especially think that there's place for it when they're making a really solid design that isn't just, you know, following whatever latest trend, but is producing something that's attractive and very wearable. And let's get on the wrist real quick and I'll show you that. Okay, here's a shot of the 40mm Calamity on the wrist. Very reasonable lug width, 20mm oyster style bracelet. Just a very typical kind of double clasp here with a button. The final version is going to have a diver's extension, which this watch doesn't have. But as you can see, this is just a very versatile size in a lot of ways. Thin, comfortable on the wrist, not too heavy, but definitely has some wrist presence too, and fits into that dressy diver category that would allow you to wear this easily under a cuff or in a more casual situation, you know, wearing a t-shirt, as I am in this case. It's going to work in all those situations. One of the things I want to point out too before I forget is this beautiful double dome sapphire crystal with just a slight bezel, that slight edged bezel right before it hits the ceramic bezel. Those are the kind of details, along with something like the carefully knurled crown and carefully knurled rotating bezel, that I think again are setting some of the details of this watch apart from, say, your typical $500 boutique dive watch. I think that again, for the right kind of collector, it might be worth reaching up into that new price segment to get a watch that is going to have those level of details if you're going to appreciate it. Okay, here's a Calamity next to some other plausible alternatives, you might say. First of all, why not just get a Seiko? Well, there's a number of reasons. First of all, if you're looking at something like the Orion brand, you probably already are collecting watches like this Seiko Turtle, and you might be looking to, you know, build your collection, diversify a little bit. Second of all, I would say that they really are different watches upon closer inspection. You know, 44 millimeters versus 40. The thickness is vastly different, and just look at the differences in detail in the cases. I mean, there's real differences there. What about something like this Zelos, which is a watch I'm going to be reviewing shortly, probably later this month. This is the Mako in bronze. Well, think about if you're into collecting microbrand watches, how nicely these two would fit together in a collection. They're both 40 millimeters. The thickness is quite a bit different, and they're just very different designs. So to me, you know, again, if you're into micro brands, these could be a great, you know, complementary pair in a collection. This is a Spinnaker. You know, of some of my Segas with Spinnaker. I'm going to actually be giving this watch away on my Patreon. If you want to join me and support me on Patreon, you can find out how I'm going to give this watch away on July 1st. Cons, of course, are, you know, you're taking a risk buying a watch like this, sort of from a financial standpoint. I don't think that you are as likely to get your money back or gain money the way you would sometimes with keeping an Omega or a Rolex for a long time. And I also think that this is a watch that isn't going to be the luxury status type of item the way that even Omega is striving for these days. That's not for everyone, though. It certainly isn't for me for the most part, and I think that for the average person who is interested in trying out a micro brand, and here I'm going to try to turn the bezel under camera. This is another thing that he said is going to be improved. It's pretty stiff now. Yeah, there we go. I just need to get a good grip on it. For that niche market, if you're one of those people, this watch is really an exciting, interesting proposition, and having the opportunity to work with a designer and a watch producer pretty much directly, I definitely understand the consumer appeal about that, and that's why I thought I would bring you this here today. Thought you would just enjoy this first look at the Orion Calamity. Let me know in your comments below what you think of the microbrew market. What's its status in 2018 in your opinion? Are there brands that you're loyal to or that you would buy from again? I know for sure that I would buy from Halios again. I would probably buy an Ocean 7 again, although my experience with the LM6 back in the day was that it was way too huge. I want to try out an Autodromo this year. There are definitely other micro brands that interest me. You'll be seeing this Zelos Mako coming up soon. And anyway, I'd love to hear your comments below. And I definitely invite any conversation about the idea that maybe some of these smaller brands should be challenging a market that's been largely vacated by the major brands. Okay, guys, before we're done, I do want to just mention that I'm also giving away this Spinnaker This is a brand that I initially wanted to collaborate with, and unfortunately they're not sending me the watch that I'm interested in, but they did send me this watch, which is a perfectly good dive watch. It's just not to my taste, but maybe you like it, and maybe you'd be interested in a free dive watch. And so if you are interested, please join me on Patreon and support me there, and by becoming a Patreon subscriber you'll be eligible to win this watch, which I will be giving away on July 1st. All right, let me know what you think in the comments below. As always, I appreciate your thumbs up. If you're new to the channel here, I invite you to subscribe. And as always, thanks a lot for your time.